Sean Strickland is itching to step back into the UFC octagon, but his return is on hold until later this year. The former UFC middleweight champion is currently sidelined by a 6-month suspension from the Nevada Athletic Commission after he physically attacked a regional MMA fighter at a Tough Enough event in June. The punishment has kept him inactive since February, when he lost his belt to Dricus du Plessis in a hard-fought clash at UFC 312. While Israel Adesanya had floated the idea of a rematch with Strickland earlier in the year, the suspension meant the fight never materialized. Now, with November marking the end of his ban, Strickland is eager to rebook his career and has been pushing for a fight in Las Vegas before the year is out. However, not everyone sees Vegas as the destination. Former champion Robert Whittaker, also looking to rebound from tough losses, has called for Strickland to meet him in Sydney, Australia next February. On the MMA Arcade podcast, Whittaker made his intentions clear. "I want to fight in Sydney next Feb. I'd love to fight Strickland. I've been wanting that fight for a while. I think it'd be a good fight. He always brings people to cards." Whittaker, who has dropped back-to-back fights against Khamzat Chimaev and Rainier de Ridder, knows he needs a statement performance to avoid the first 3-fight skid of his career. Facing the number 3 ranked Strickland in front of a home crowd could be just the fight to reignite his run. But there's one complication: Strickland's history with Australia. Despite his famous upset win over Adesanya at UFC 293 in Sydney, where he unexpectedly became a fan favorite, Strickland has repeatedly voiced his distaste for the Australian government. After losing to du Plessis in Sydney at UFC 312, where he also suffered a broken nose, Strickland suggested he never wanted to fight there again. Whittaker himself admitted he isn't confident Strickland would make the trip. "I don't think he'll come all the way here to Australia. I heard he has the best rapport with the Australian government," he added sarcastically. Still, with both men searching for redemption, the matchup makes a lot of sense. Strickland brings controversy, personality, and name value, while Whittaker brings proven skill and home country star power. If the UFC can convince Strickland to head back to Sydney, this could be a major headliner for early 2025. Former UFC middleweight champion Robert Whittaker believes Jon Jones is facing the consequences of his own decisions, particularly regarding the UFC's heavyweight division and his recent White House comeback plans. After Dana White initially announced Jones' retirement, Bones quickly backtracked, citing interest in the UFC White House event scheduled for 2026 as his motivation to return. Conor McGregor has also expressed interest in the White House card, but Jones appears to have been excluded. Whittaker thinks this is entirely of Jones' own making. During an episode of his MMA Arcade podcast, Whittaker broke down the situation, saying Jones bought ahead of himself and pushed the limits of his value to the UFC. That whole length of time of inactivity and holding up the division and keeping Tom Aspinall on the sidelines, it was a bit much. Not only that, the way he was acting about it, the way he was saying what he was doing, he was flaunting the power he had. "I think that's where he stretched the trust factor with the bosses," Whittaker explained. The controversy stems from Jones's approach to the UFC heavyweight division this year. Aspinall had been left as the interim champion for over a year, while Jones took on Stipe Miocic, but then refused to unify the belts. Whittaker says the UFC's decision to sideline Jones from the high-profile White House card is a direct reflection of how he handled that situation. While many agree with White's stance, former 2-division champion Daniel Cormier has a different take. Despite his heated rivalry with Jones, including incidents like the failed drug test before UFC 200, Cormier has expressed support for Jones's return. On his YouTube channel, Cormier said, "Dana seems more stern in not letting him today than I have ever seen him in regards to Jon Jones. And if I'm being completely honest, I don't know that I agree. I think I would let him fight." Ultimately, Jones's future with the UFC appears complicated. Even as he positions himself for a high-profile return, his history of divisional delays, canceled bouts, and contentious dealings with the promotion have made the UFC brass wary. Whittaker believes Jones's current exclusion is a clear example of actions having consequences, while Cormier remains hopeful that Jones could still grace the White House card. This standoff underscores the fine line Jones has walked between legendary fighter and unreliable asset, showing that even the most dominant athletes in MMA can face career setbacks when trust with the promotion erodes. Charles Oliveira isn't pulling any punches with his words as the scramble to salvage UFC Rio's main event heats up. Originally set to face Rafael Fiziev on October 11 in Rio de Janeiro, the former lightweight champion suddenly found himself without a dance partner when Fiziev went down with an injury. Almost immediately, fighters began tossing their names into the conversation online, creating the impression of a lineup eager to step in. But in Oliveira's eyes, the reality is very different, and he's had enough of what he sees as fake callouts. In a fiery message posted to his Instagram stories, Du Bronx directly called out those he believes are using the situation purely for attention. He accused fighters of clout chasing by publicly volunteering for the fight, only to balk when the UFC follows up with a contract. According to Oliveira, the excuses start rolling in as soon as things get serious. Not enough time to make weight, small injuries suddenly flaring up, or vague reasons that allow them to back out without looking bad. He didn't mince words. Don't fall for the talk. They want headlines. They want people talking, but none of them really want to fight me on this stage. It's embarrassing, and it's not a good look. For Oliveira, this isn't just about filling a card. UFC Rio represents a deeply personal opportunity. Fighting in front of his Brazilian fans has been one of his goals since his last outing, and he has made it clear to the UFC that he intends to remain on the card no matter what. Being pulled from the main event would be a crushing disappointment, but being used as a prop for other fighters' social media buzz without anyone stepping up to sign the contract frustrates him even more. His message was not just for his peers, but for the UFC and fans as well. He's ready, focused, and willing to face anyone who will actually commit. This situation also underlines a larger theme in modern MMA, the gap between online posturing and real action. Fighters know that dropping their names into high-profile situations can grab headlines and rally fan support, even if they have no intention of following through. But when it comes to stepping up against someone as dangerous as Charles Oliveira, a record-breaking submission artist, a proven finisher, and a fan favorite in his home country, the risk is too high for most. In Brazil, in a hostile arena with almost no time to prepare, the challenge becomes even steeper. Oliveira's frustration is therefore understandable. He sees himself ready and willing to put on a show for his home crowd, while others are content to use his name for hype without paying the price that comes with actually fighting him. His message was not just for his peers, but for the UFC and fans as well. He's ready, focused, and willing to face anyone who will actually commit. At this point, the storyline isn't just about who Oliveira fights, but whether anyone has the courage to back up their words with action. If someone does step up, UFC Rio could go from chaos to one of the year's most dramatic showcases. If not, the card risks losing its star attraction, and Oliveira risks losing a moment that means more to him than just another fight.
Dean Thomas's provocative suggestion to trade Dakota Ditcheva for Magomed Ankalaev has certainly stirred the MMA world, sparking debate over whether marketability should ever outweigh merit in matchmaking and roster decisions. Thomas's argument is straightforward. MMA is a star-driven sport, and the UFC thrives on personalities that capture attention as much as technical skill. He praises Ditcheva as a legitimate star, highlighting her perfect 15-0 record, explosive finishing ability, and marketable personality. Her PFL Flyweight Championship win over Taila Santos in 2024, complete with a $1 million prize, only solidified her appeal. Thomas argues that someone with Ditcheva's combination of skill, charisma, and audience pull belongs in the UFC, and that Ankalaev, while technically brilliant, doesn't have the mainstream draw that aligns with UFC's promotional needs. Ankalaev, 33, recently captured the UFC Light Heavyweight Championship by defeating Alex Pereira at UFC 313 in March 2025. His style is precise, calculated, and grappling-focused, making him a highly skilled champion, but one who lacks the flair and spectacle often associated with top-tier UFC marketing. Thomas contends that while Ankalaev is undoubtedly elite, his quieter personality and less flashy style make him less necessary to the UFC's star-driven model, a statement that has understandably drawn backlash from purists who argue that meritocracy and respect for a champion's accomplishments should never be compromised. Trading a reigning champion before their first title defense could set a controversial precedent, undermining the credibility of the UFC belt. For now, Ankalaev and Ditcheva remain firmly in their respective organizations. Ankalaev is focused on defending his light heavyweight title, while Ditcheva has returned to the PFL with another dominant win over Sumiko Inaba in July 2025 at PFL Cape Town. Whether the UFC will seriously consider Thomas's bold proposal remains to be seen, but the conversation underscores an ongoing tension in MMA, balancing competitive integrity with marketability, and finding the stars who can elevate the sport while keeping the octagon filled with elite-level action. Ultimately, the question is less about the feasibility of a trade, which would be unprecedented, and more about what the UFC values most: technical excellence, entertainment appeal, or some combination of the two. Thomas's comments have already succeeded in starting a debate that the MMA community won't easily forget.
Kayla Harrison's rise to UFC champion status has been filled with challenges, rivalries, and plenty of doubters, but her perspective on one of her most heated opponents has shifted in a surprising way. Back in June, Harrison stepped into the octagon against former champion Juliana Pena for the UFC Women's Bantamweight Championship. The fight was built on weeks of tension, fiery back-and-forth exchanges, and even personal jabs. Pena went so far as to accuse Harrison of using performance-enhancing drugs. For a fighter who has never leaned into trash talk, the build-up was uncharted territory for Harrison, who admitted that the constant verbal sparring made the atmosphere more intense than anything she'd previously experienced. When fight night finally arrived, Harrison delivered emphatically. The two-time Olympic judo gold medalist imposed her will, dominating Pena before securing a slick second-round submission that crowned her as the new bantamweight queen. The win was a statement not just to her opponent, but to the UFC fan base that wondered how Harrison would handle the bright lights and the toughest competition of her career. But when the fight was over, something unexpected happened. Instead of continuing the animosity, Harrison and Pena shared a quiet, emotional moment in the cage. The two fighters knelt together for a post-fight prayer, a gesture that left a lasting impact on the new champion. "I definitely said that I wouldn't be friends with her, but I think I was wrong," Harrison admitted in an interview with MMA Fighting. "I'm woman enough to admit when I'm wrong." Sharing that prayer was really powerful. I just wanted to go pray for her, but when she prayed for me, that was telling. It showed me she's a true sportswoman. She sold the fight, she did what she had to do, and I respect that. Harrison also confessed that in hindsight, she actually enjoyed the heated lead up to their fight. "It's the most trash talk and the most tension I've ever had in a fight, and I actually had fun with it," she said with a laugh. "I think Juliana is cool, she's legit, and I'm good with her now." As far as a rematch goes, Harrison doesn't see it happening anytime soon. Pena has made it clear she intends to climb her way back into title contention, but the path back to a shot at gold could take time. For Harrison, the focus has already shifted to her future as bantamweight champion. The looming question is what comes next. A blockbuster super fight with the recently retired Amanda Nunes, long considered the greatest women's fighter in MMA history, remains the dream scenario, though there's no guarantee Nunes will return from retirement. If not, the UFC could match her up with a top-ranked contender for her first title defense, a challenge she seems ready to embrace. Either way, Harrison has already made her mark in the UFC. By combining dominant performances inside the cage with humility and respect outside of it, she has positioned herself as a new star in women's MMA, one whose story is just beginning to unfold.
Juan Archuleta has spent more than a decade carving out his legacy across some of MMA's toughest promotions. And now, as he nears the twilight of his career, he has his sights set on one final chapter: the UFC. With close to 40 professional fights under his belt, the Spaniard has faced a who's who of elite talent. Names like Patricio Pitbull Freire, Patchy Mix, Sergio Pettis, and Kai Asakura. He's collected championships, battled through highs and lows, and built a reputation as a gritty, relentless competitor. But despite everything he's accomplished, one box remains unchecked: fighting under the UFC banner. In a recent interview with MMA Fighting, Archuleta made it clear that his dream is to close out his career inside the octagon. At 38 years old, he knows his time in the sport is limited, and he wants to make these final years meaningful. Ideal scenario to walk away with a storybook ending, Archuleta said. That's definitely the ideal situation. Finish off the last 3 or 4 years of opportunity I have right now and just ride off into the sunset. For Archuleta, it's not just about checking off a bucket list item. It's about proving that he still belongs among the best. He understands that the UFC wants action fighters, finishers, and personalities who bring value to the promotion. Quote, "Obviously, I have to bring something of value to the UFC for them to sign me. And right now, it's like they want to see people that want to fight and people that want to end fights." His recent performances suggest he still has plenty left in the tank. Archuleta is coming off a second-round submission win over Jose Johnson at XFC 53, where he successfully defended his Barroca featherweight championship. That victory was his second straight after rebounding from a tough 3-fight skid, showing that he can still adapt, recover, and put on a show when the stakes are high. Still, Archuleta is realistic. If the UFC doesn't come calling, he's ready to keep chasing challenges elsewhere. One option on the table is a return to Rizin, where he's already competed against some of Japan's best. If this doesn't happen, signing up with Rizin on New Year's to make one more run at the featherweight title there, he revealed. With a professional record of 31-7, including 12 knockout wins and 2 submissions, Archuleta has built a career that commands respect. He's fought in multiple weight classes, taken on world champions, and tested himself on some of the sport's biggest stages. But for him, the chance to finally make the walk inside a UFC octagon would be the ultimate validation, the kind of ending every veteran fighter dreams of. The question now is whether the UFC matchmakers will see the same value Archuleta believes he brings. At this stage in his career, every fight counts, and Archuleta is determined to make the most of the opportunities left. Whether it's under the bright lights of the UFC or in a Rizin ring in Japan, the Spaniard isn't done writing his story just yet.
Ronda Rousey may not be lacing up for another professional MMA bout, but she's clearly rekindling her passion for the sport in a new, lighter way. Rowdy carved her place in MMA history as a pioneer for women in the sport, dominating the UFC women's bantamweight division and becoming one of the most recognized fighters worldwide. Her meteoric rise brought attention, fame, and influence, but by the end of her competitive run, the intense scrutiny and mental toll left her disillusioned with MMA. After her high-profile losses to Holly Holm and Amanda Nunes, Rousey transitioned to WWE and other ventures, stepping away from the octagon for years. Now, Rousey is rediscovering the joy of training without the pressures of competition. In recent social media posts, she shared clips from her sessions on the mat, along with candid reflections about her journey back to loving the sport. From 8 weeks after having a baby and 8 years of stepping away from MMA to 8 months postpartum and finding my love for it again, Rousey wrote, she recounted her initial hesitancy. The first clip is my first session working with coach AJ Matthews. I was super self-conscious, embarrassed of how much I regressed, and honestly trying my very best not to pee my pants throwing punches so soon after having baby pay.
Fast forward to her most recent training, and Rousey's perspective has transformed entirely. Second clip was yesterday. I've never laughed or smiled so much on the mat as I do these days. The last 6 months have been an absolute blast. Feels like I have so much left to grow, and without the weight of the world on my shoulders, nothing is holding me back. While she hasn't competed since her 2016 defeat at the hands of Amanda Nunes, Rousey's return to the gym shows she's embracing MMA for the love of learning, movement, and growth, rather than for titles or fame. She's focused on enjoying the process and rediscovering the skills that once made her a household name, free from the intense pressures that previously weighed her down. Despite indications that she intends to stay retired, the looming possibility of the UFC's White House card in 2026 keeps fans speculating that, while she may not officially return to competition, she's keeping her connection to the sport alive and inspiring a new generation of athletes to find joy in the journey itself, not just the spotlight. Her story is a reminder that passion for a craft doesn't have to fade just because the competitive chapter ends. Sometimes stepping back allows the love of the sport to grow even stronger.